This episode was made possible through the generosity of our supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to see videos and hear podcasts before everyone else, become a supporter of Liz Law App on Patreon to support our work here at Byther Farm.
Hello and welcome back to the Byther Farm Gardening Podcast, and today I am so pleased to have with me Mr. David Hurrion. Hello, David.
Hello, Liz. It's a real pleasure to join you. And you know what? Today, the sun's out. Yippee!
It is. So, whereabouts in the world are you, David?
I live in Dorset now, North Dorset. Really, really lucky to be where I am. And the climate, you think, oh, Dorset's really mild. Well, it is on the coast, but up here, I'm lucky enough to live in probably Dorset's only frost pocket. So, I live in a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, so that we're also very lucky. Up a mountain in Wales, very beautiful, but very wet, and yes, very frosty as well. So,
and there are all those, challenges that come with that rural living, aren't there? Really, people who live in towns or even large villages, the whole scale of living rurally and gardening rurally and keeping life and soul together is much more challenging. It sounds like a rural idyll, but I know where you're coming from.
yes. So, David, people probably know your name, but don't know why they know your name. So, can you share with people listening, share with everybody a potted history of your gardening life?
I won't start at the beginning. I'll start at the most recent because I think that work backwards. So I think people possibly know me because I was the deputy editor and the associate editor on Gardener's World magazine for a long time. I've also been in various other magazines. So I was features editor and gardening editor on Amateur Gardening many moons ago, Britain's oldest gardening magazine, and it's just still going strong. It closed, but it's back up started, and I'm so pleased about that.
My exciting bit of news is my first article in Amateur Gardening magazine is out next week. So
fantastic. Can you tell us what it's about?
It is about, yes, I can. Why not? Because I think by the time it's gone out, magazine will have been out. It's about planting combinations for spring. So floral combinations, flowers that I love seeing together.
Yeah. And that's really important, isn't it? Because I think we all know the tried and tested spring flowers, but actually combining them and making a really fabulous show. I'm looking forward to reading it already. Anyway, prior to amateur gardening, I used to be a lecturer. So I taught horticulture for, on and off for about 10 years in different colleges. I trained as a teacher. I trained in horticulture as well. And I've gardened since I was about 5 years old, thanks to my wonderful aunts and uncles who brought me up, who were fantastic people and mad keen gardeners. And then in the midst of all this great big melting pot of what I've done, I also worked as a travel courier. So I've been working all the way around the world, taking groups to see plants and gardens all over the world. And I've been blessed with a very lucky life.
That sounds fantastic. That sounds fabulous. So that's the history bit. But one of the reasons I was so keen to speak to you is because my garden is, so I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. My garden is on a hillside, gets very wet. So we have created our vegetable garden is completely done in raised beds. And our previous home was all in raised beds. And you know some stuff about raised bed gardening, don't you?
Well, I've been not, I wouldn't say the keenest exponent of it, but I've always said raised beds are really useful. Raised bed growing is really useful where the soil conditions or the shape of your garden or the design of your garden means that you need to lift plants up, you need to raise them up. I think if you've got really decent soil and it's on the level, grow it on the level. Don't worry about raised beds, obviously, unless you've got a need to lift them up, so to help you physically garden. But I'm a great exponent of gardening on the level, but there are so many occasions when it's useful to lift beds up, and yours is a prime example. On a hillside. I've just done a post on Instagram, for example, literally just before we started this, where one of the images in the book is of a fairly steep garden. It's a couple that I garden for here in Dorset, and they are right on the side of a hill, and it's brilliant because it actually faces pretty much south and southeast. So it's a great location. But unless they retained the soil in those raised beds, down the hill, sort of terraced down the hill, they wouldn't be able to grow, because as you cultivate the ground, all the soil washes away in the winter. This being a great example of one of those winters where all your soil would end up down at the bottom of the hill. So, I think you're doing exactly the right thing by terracing your garden really with raised beds, so that you can get level growing areas to make cultivation really easy.
Yes, and we have the added joy of gardening on a north-facing slope in the middle of a wind farm. We did. We wanted lots of challenges.
I'm not sure what challenges the wind farm presents, but the north-facing aspect, actually, this, is actually quite good because it gives you very even growing conditions. There's no peaks and troughs of temperatures. Everything's really steady. And once things start to warm up, because you're growing them on a raised bed, you're actually lifting the plants up where they can get good light because of the angle of the sun. Whereas if you just grew on that north-facing slope, that sort of aspect faces away from the sun. So raised beds on a north slope, absolutely ideal.
So
you right.
Sorry?
You're doing everything right. It's perfect. It's almost like you know what you're doing.
So you have just mentioned your book. So your new book was published on the 7th of March, World Book Day.
I know, it was so auspicious. And I was in really great company because it was published by Dorling Kindersley Books. And there was a little fleet of us who have all share the same book birthday, as we call it. So the 7th of March. And I was very excited by it. And I've written books before, but this one is what I would call quite a grown-up book. It's not too lofty, but it's a hardback, and it's had a lot of care spent on it, and I'm very pleased with it.
Excellent. So I'm going to leave links to your website and to other bits and pieces you've done, and also so that people can buy your books. I'll leave those in the show notes. But let's move on a little bit let's talk about your garden at home now. What sort of space are you gardening, and what are you doing with it?
So my garden is not as big as most people think. I think because I was in fairly important positions, people saw my garden in all the publications that I've worked on over the years. They think, oh, he's got a massive garden. Or let me tell you a secret, that quite a lot of that garden space was either my sister's garden, because she's got a big acre plot, or it was various people that I gardened for. So we often did photography in those gardens. But my garden is only 100 foot long and 60 foot wide.
That's still a goodly size, isn't it?
It's the biggest garden I've ever had, because I've always had very small gardens. So I'm really lucky to have got to this size. And don't get me wrong, I'm very happy with it. But I think most gardeners want a little bit more room, don't they? So what I did in this garden, because it has got a very gentle slope, my garden. I'm not like you living on a mountainside. And it's got a very gentle slope. So I effectively created, here we are, here's a plug again. I effectively created broad, deep raised beds, if you like, going up the garden. So it's divided it was sloping when we moved in. So up that 100 foot, I divided it into 3 sections, and each section is divided by having a little bit of a low wall that brings that surface level nice and flat. so that I can garden on each of those gradual levels. And it's quite nice because it feels quite grand walking up these broad, shallow layers, if you like, up the garden. And when you get to the top of the garden, of course, you can look back down and feeling really grand. And so in the first bit of the garden closest to the house, I'm on the RHS Tender Ornamental Plant Committee now for my sins, which sounds very lofty, but that means that I really like plants where you push the boundaries of hardiness out in the garden. I grow a lot of house plants indoors as well, but just outside the house, I've got almost like a subtropical garden with palm trees and bananas and, fantastic big leafed things during the summer. But unlike a lot of those jungly gardens, I actually haven't got time to put stuff out in the spring and then haul it in the winter and then put it out in the spring.
Yeah.
I can't be doing with it. So I've tried to create in this first third, if you like, walking up from the back of the house, a hardy, exotic looking garden with big leafed plants. And you'd be surprised at how much is hardy and tough. So then the next section going up is a little bit more formal. And I don't know about you, but I like formal gardens to look at sometimes. Not everything I like formal, but I like formal gardens. So in a nod to formality, the next section of the garden is what I call grandly, here we go, the pond garden.
Nice.
It sounds very posh, but it's not at all.
Oh,
but it's
we name every section of our garden. So just
what
to
have
allow you
got?
to
Have you got a
identify.
pond garden? Have you
Sorry?
got a pond garden? Have you got a pond garden?
No, we don't. But I love the name.
Here's one for you. No, all it is I made a 3 foot deep and 5 foot square pond, very like a tank, really. And then I just grow a fantastic water lily in the centre of it. I'm not a big fan of goldfish, but I've got a little ramp in it, so it's absolutely the focal point of frog breeding at the moment.
Lovely, yes.
So that's really exciting. And then round the edge, there's sort of like a very formal arrangement of paths, but not too much, because I'm not a big fan of big paved areas, because we need water to soak into the ground, don't we? So, and then round there's a mixture of my favourite roses and some shrubs and lots of herbaceous stuff.
Nice.
And then the top layer, once you get to the final 30 feet of the garden, if you like, where you step up onto that last layer. When we moved in here about 18 years ago, I planted some very, very teeny tiny little birch trees. They were about 8 inches tall.
I bet they're not teeny tiny now.
I love birch. Do you love birch trees?
I do love birch, and we've got several different birches in the garden. So yes, I completely get why you planted them.
So I love all those different stem colours. So there's a pink stemmed Russian birch, Betula albosinensis. Here we go, septentrionalis. There's a mouthful.
Say it one more time.
Betula albosinensis septentrionalis. That's a good one, isn't it?
It's a fantastic one.
Shows that I'm botanically trained. And so I've got a group of pink stemmed birches, a group of orange stemmed birches, one called Betula Hokkaido orange. And then in the middle are the white stem birches, what I would call the standard ones, and the Himalayan birch. And now these are 40 foot high, and I planted them on little mounds because I'm from Dorset now. Around here, you've got lots of burial mounds, tumuli. So I made 3 mounds across the back of the garden and planted a spiral of each colour up each one of those 3 mounds. And now they've gone way up high and they're looking really elegant and birch-like, and it's an absolute joy. And underneath, here we go. I'm an absolute Mad King Galanthophylle. I love snowdrops. So I've got about 54 varieties of snowdrops underplanted that have just been, they've been flowering. I've got one autumn flowering variety, and then they start flowering in the autumn and they go on I've got the latest one just coming into flower now because it's an early season. So yeah, it's an absolute joy. And then later in the year up there, it's all sort of other woodland plants. So there's primroses and bluebells and all sorts of things. So do you know, it ticks all the boxes for me. It ticks the tropical exotic-y bit close to the
Yeah.
house, the formal bit, and the woodlandy bit. And then also I've got an allotment as well. So there we are, but that's not here.
So
I do
allotment is
all my
veggie,
garden.
fruit and veg.
Yeah, fruit and veg,
Yeah.
you know, traditional fruit and veg. One of the things that I started when I was a kid was my Uncle Jim was a mad keen veg grower. And there's no way that a 5-year-old wouldn't have some of that rub off on him. You know, the joy of going up to the end of the garden and picking the peas for supper, and actually probably eating more peas than I picked.
I think that's the
Wonderful.
case now. My peas rarely make it to the kitchen. They're kind of for garden consumption.
Yeah, they're better for you, I think, when they're fresh and green and uncooked, when they're raw.
And they taste
But
nicer.
you know, I think we've got to really encourage kids, haven't we? Because I know that that's what really cemented it with me. And this whole mentality of catch 'em early, you know, 5-year-old, their brain is just, they want to learn. And if they learn about nature and that wonderful thing about growing your own food, you know, they're going to have they're set for life. So, yeah.
Amazing. So can I skip back? Because I have a passion for roses. So can we
Yeah.
talk a bit more about the roses in your pond garden?
You've
And
got it. You've got the terminology. The
yeah,
pond
in the
garden.
pond garden. So do you want, can we just talk about some of our favourite roses?
So I don't know about you, but I really love, when it comes to roses, I really love those rich, what I call jewel colours. Jewel, as in Aewel. So I love things like, do you know Rhapsody in Blue, for
I
example,
do, yes.
which isn't actually blue.
No.
It's more of a sort of a purpley mauve colour. And it's such a lovely, rich shade that I really like it. And I grow a mixture of bush and also what I would call David Austin types, you know,
Yeah.
modern roses. Which ones do you grow?
I have mostly I've got David Austin style modern roses, and
Yeah.
I've got a few as a hangover from my teenage years. I've got a few hybrid tea roses, which sometimes I think, why am I growing these? Because they feel like they're quite a lot of work, and then they flower, and I go, well, that's why, because I like them.
Because the flowers on those hybrid teas, big single blooms, they're stunning, aren't they? And of course, the other old type of rose, old type of bush rose, is floribundas, the ones that produce
Yeah.
more than one flower per stem. But you know, I think if you like any of those roses, we don't need to be sniffy about them, do we? Really?
No. And I've last year, was it last year? Maybe the year before. I've put in a hedge of Rosa rugosa that
Yeah,
go
I've got.
all around the orchard, so
Yeah.
that we can, well, so that I can harvest the hips basically to make jelly and syrup and wine, lots of wine.
And there are so many of those lovely roses, aren't there? Those almost species roses that have those, and there are different coloured hips as well. So there's a really wonderful black hipped variety, which I can't remember the name of now, but there are so many different shapes and forms and colours that they're just
Yeah.
as nice as the flowers, particularly in the winter. You know, you
Yes.
want something to look at in the winter. What other favourites have you got then? Any favourite varieties of bush or
So
modern rose?
I'm having a bit of a passion with I think it's a floribunda called Tranquility, which
Hmm.
is creamy white. It's not harsh white, but it's not yellowy cream. So it's somewhere between the two. And it just does this sort of multi-head whoosh of pale prettiness. And I have a rose arch, quite a long rose arch, and it's sort of at the bottom end of that. And most of the rose arch is in various different shades of pink. So it's really nice to have this cream, and it actually sits next to Gertrude Jekyll as a
Because
kind
you
of,
need something to contrast with the darker pinks, don't you?
Yes.
That paler colour, that creamy paler colour, really enlivens the other pinks really,
Yeah.
really well. So I think we're probably two ends of the spectrum, really. As you said, more pinks and
Yeah,
soft colours.
that's it.
And
And
I
well,
like,
I have a shrubbery,
yeah,
and that's got the yellows and apricots in it. So it's got things like Just Joey, which I think is a,
oh,
or
isn't
is
that
no, not
lovely?
Just Joey, or is it a poetry one? I can't remember. Something that's really strong yellow.
Yeah. So
And I,
Just Joey is that sort of amber colour, isn't it? It's a jewel of an amber coloured rose. And the scent, sort of almost apricot colour,
Mhm.
really, Just Joey. And the scent from it is delightful. It's such a beautifully scented rose.
Oh, I'm gonna have to think what that yellow one was. There's one that is a really strong buttery yellow, and I don't usually like yellow roses, and then every time it comes out I think, oh, yes, I do like yellow roses.
Well, I like the soft end of the yellow spectrum in roses, but I really, all the pale yellows and the sort of, but I really like the golden yellows. So the
Mm,
golden end of it is really lovely, and it fits in with my dual color scheme again.
nice.
But I really love, the other thing I really love is really rich red roses, because I think there's something just to fall in love with about a really beautiful red rose. And there's one called Tuscany Superb. I don't know whether you know that, but that's a
No,
sort of a bushy rose. It's quite an old fashioned variety, but it's really easy to care for. It's as tough as old boots. It comes up year after year, and you don't really have to prune it all that carefully. And it flowers its socks off with me, so I really like that one.
yeah, so that sounds like an absolute winner. That,
Yeah,
that one.
Tuscany
The
Superb.
first red rose I bought was called Alex Red,
Oh yeah, that's a good one, good deep one, or
which is a
quite a strong red, but quite a deep red, isn't it?
mm,
It's good. Yeah, I
um
like it.
and I got that because my son is called Alec, and so when he was born, it was like first plant I'm going to buy after I had my son was going to be named one that was named for him. Obviously, it wasn't named for him, but same name as him. Yeah, just keep that absolutely clear. It wasn't named for my son.
No, what, Liz? Tell you what, I've got to send you, because the brilliant thing about it at this time of year is you can take cuttings from roses, can't you? You can take
Yes.
cuttings of last season's new growth,
Mm,
about finger thickness, little finger thickness, so pencil thickness, and about 9 inches long, cut above a bud at the top, below a bud at the bottom. And when you're doing your pruning, save these hardwood
yes.
cuttings and pop them in the ground, and they root so easily. So I'm going to send you some hardwood cuttings of a rose that not many people have got. And it was sent to me as a trial rose years ago. And I gather that in America it was launched, and it's called Tangerine Skies in America.
Oh,
But you can't get it here because
David, thank you so
they,
much. Right,
they
I'm
decided not
grinning
to
like
sell it.
mad.
Well, they decided not to sell it here for some reason. So I have a plant of it, and it's in the front garden, and everybody who walks past the house says, "What is that rose?" The scent is amazing. It's completely pest and disease free. It never gets anything,
Oh,
anything at
wow.
all. And it's what I would call almost like a large bush or a small climber. So you can train it up a wall or up a column,
Mm,
and it'll probably get to about 8 feet maximum.
right.
Um, or you could cut it harder back, and it produces multi flowers on one stem. It's an absolute corker,
Oh,
and
that sounds fantastic.
the scent, I've never smelt a rose like it. It's fantastic. So there we are. They've got your name on it. When I
Thank
go
you
out
very
for,
much. In that case, I will do a little swap. I don't know if you can see behind me. I have, this is a good old aspidistra here.
yeah,
However, the parent plant of this, which is about 2.5 feet across in a
wow,
container, lives outside. And it lived outside all through the -10 and minus whatever else 13 we got to last
yeah,
winter. And so I will make sure that I send you a little bit of that to go into your jungle garden.
Oh, yes, please, because they're really shade tolerant as well, aren't they? That's why they make
They
such good
are.
houses. Yeah, I do know. I used to have an aspidistra that was my great aunt's, and I have to admit, it died. Let's just say it died. I didn't kill it, but it was because I went away for a year and left it with somebody to look after, and they killed it. So I love an aspidistra. So is yours the biggest in the world? Your aspidistra?
No, I don't think it is. I'm sure there are plenty that are bigger. It's just that it's just it's got bigger and bigger, and it's completely pot bound in this container. And every now and then I need to just cut a chunk off it, which is, I then bring a bit into the house.
There we are. Fair swap. Fair swap.
Brilliant. Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited. That
Good.
rose sounds
Good
fab.
idea. Good idea.
So, oh, I'm grinning. I almost don't know what to say now. It's really nice. This is the thing about gardeners, isn't it? Is that there is a thing about sharing plants and sharing knowledge and experiences.
Well, then the other thing I will send you is a snowdrop. So it's now, as they finish flowering, or even when they're fully in flower, is a great time to divide them, because that's called dividing them in the green, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually, ideally, you should wait until they've died down completely, about sort of midsummer, about August. Officially, that's the best time to divide.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I better say that in case there is any other galantophiles, snowdrop aficionados listening. But I mean, you can still lift them and divide them now, as long as you don't sort of mash them up. But and then plant them nice and deeply in the soil with their leaves sticking out. So I'm going to send you a little clump of what I grow, which is my latest in the year flowering snowdrop, which is one
Oh,
called,
lovely.
it's called Warham. And
Oh.
it really is a late flowering variety. So when all the other snowdrops have been doing their thing, and you sort of shed a tear because they're
Yeah.
over for the spring, Warham pops up and you go, oh,
Oh, how
it's
fantastic.
the last blast. So I'll send you a little clump of those as well with
Oh,
with that.
super. Well, I can tell you exactly where they're going to go. I'm going to put them by one of the gates in the runway. So our garden has it's a vehicle track down the middle of it,
Right.
with fencing each side, and I've put in hedges on the other side of the fences, and I've lined the track with daffodils. It's got two different varieties of daffodils, so an earlier one and a late one. So when you look down at the right time of year, there is sort of 130 meters of daffodils looking at you.
Yeah, pardon there. But are you a hard and fast yellow daffodiller, or
No.
do you accept the paler ones, the
Oh no,
creamy
I embrace the paler ones.
ones?
And so I really like, what's the last, I can't even think what the last one I put in was.
There is a great variety, I don't know whether you know it, called W.P. Milner.
Oh no, I
W.
don't. I'm learning
Oh,
so much.
oh, I hope so. And it's a little one. It's almost like a wild looking
Hmm.
species, but it is a hybrid, but it's got the most elegant, refined flowers, and that sort of just slightly hang, and it's a beautiful creamy color, and it subtly changes from paler to darker as it ages. It's an absolute smasher. W.P. Milner only grows to about, I don't know, about 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches.
Well,
So
that's
you,
perfect
you
on a
know,
windy site.
yeah, I was going to say for you, I'm sure some of the taller ones just get
Mm.
toppled, don't they, in the wind?
I started off with yellow and also white cheerfulness, but they're actually
Oh,
just, they're kind of too heavy for our
they are
site.
beautiful, but they do get windblown, don't they?
Yeah.
They're great for pots, though, aren't they? In a sheltered spot,
Yeah,
you
we
know.
don't have any shelter spots here. So so I've had to replant with much shorter varieties. And I was out in the garden yesterday in the bit of sunshine that we had. Yes.
Oh,
And I kind of looked across the garden and thought, what on earth is that? It's in the middle of the grass, a grassy field. And in fact, it was in the middle of yet another clump of couch grass. And there was a little pot that had been completely covered over with a couch grass. and then this little tete-a-tete flowers were sticking out the top going, we're here, we're here.
They are such good value, aren't they?
Yeah, they
I
are.
planted some when we first moved into this house, so 18 years ago, and they did really well for a few years, and then I thought I'd lost them all, and I thought, wonder where they've all gone, and probably one or two survived, because when the clumps get overpacked, they start to die out a bit, don't they? But one or two survived, and I think some of them seeded as well, and they're making a comeback. It's really phenomenal. So,
Nice.
that should be a lesson learnt there, that I should lift them and divide them every 3 or 4 years. Do as I say, because I often say to people, lift and divide them regularly, and I don't get around to doing it myself. But yeah, tete-a-tetes are gorgeous. And do you know one called Jetfire as well? That's another one about the same sort of height. And it looks like the wind is blowing those back crown of petals backwards.
Yeah.
And then it's got a really lovely long dark orange trumpet. And it's only a little one, but it's called Jetfire. That's an absolute cracker. Really, really, really good one.
I think, so I'm going to guess, I think this autumn I planted a whole load of they call it the common name of the poet's narcissi?
Yes, yeah, poeticus.
Yeah, so with the paler petals, and then a very tiny, darker.
Yeah, I think the proper Latin name is Narcissus poeticus recurvus is the proper poet. And it really is a little gem, isn't it? And very similar to that, one of my big favourites at the moment is one called the Verger. So Narcissus the Verger. And it has the most glorious cream white back petals that are quite wide, probably about 3 inches across.
Wow.
Up to about 7.5 centimetres across. And then a beautiful little gold filigreed trumpet in the middle, rather like your poet's Narcissus, but it is an absolute cracker, called the Verger. And I tried to get hold of some more in the autumn, and I think there's quite a lot of people like me who like it, because it had sold out.
So I'm going to need to re-listen to this in the autumn when I'm doing my bulb orders. Next year.
The great thing about podcasts, isn't it, that you they're up there all the time, so you can revisit them and think, oh yeah, what was that I heard earlier in the year.
So David, we are heading towards the end of my recording time, so I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me.
Because I could talk to you all morning. It's amazing.
Well, and then the question is, would you be happy to come back later in the year and chat again?
It'd be an absolute pleasure. I'd really enjoy it. I love gardening, and I love talking about gardening, and I hope your listeners love listening about gardening as well.
Oh, I think they do. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
The podcast you've been listening to is a Byther Farm production. All rights reserved.